Howdy folks, my name is Richie aka Bog Otter and welcome to another episode of Things You Oughta Know. This is a Q&A video where people ask me different types of questions. It could be gaming related, YouTube or Twitch related, it could be personal related, it could be about life, it could be about death, it could be about life after death, it could be anything you want. I've got a list of questions here I'm going to go through, but before we begin, if you have a question that you would like me to answer on a future episode of Things You Oughta Know, just shoot me an email at askbogotter@gmail.com. Okay, first up, we have a question from Pink Attitude. It's about Guild Wars 2. It says, basically, what do they mean by raids and wings specifically? I missed the first talk about this, and now they get used as if we all know what these terms mean. I'm a bit confused. Thanks so much. Okay, so raiding in general is a term used for massively multiplayer online games where you get together with a group of people. Usually it's a larger group, right? A lot of times they have content for groups of like 4 or 5 people. Those are typically smaller groups. Usually they're called dungeons, right? But if you have a larger group and you go and tackle challenging content together, and it typically would be something where you would have a dungeon of some sort that your group goes into and you clear a bunch of like little creatures, they're called trash mobs, and you typically would tackle then a boss fight. And the boss would drop some loot and you go on to the next room and you kind of clear the dungeon with your group. Raids are typically, it conjures up a thought of very challenging bosses that can take days, if weeks, or if not months to actually get your group to beat one of them. It's typically something that you will actually set up a schedule with your guild. Maybe it'll be 2 nights a week. Maybe it'll be 3 nights a week. Maybe it'll be 4 nights a week. Depending on the game, it depends on how hardcore your group is going to be. But you go there with a kind of a similar group every single night, and you jump on voice chat and you hang out and you talk strategy and you try to figure out these puzzles. How are we going to beat these very difficult encounters? So that's what raiding is in general. In Guild Wars 2, it's going to be 10-person raiding, and it's going to be challenging. I've already tested out the first raid boss, and you can see some of the footage of that in my last Tyria Talk video. But it's going to be the type of thing where players will get together and try to tackle it. Now, what a wing is they're going to be putting out picture a dungeon, for example, and let's say a dungeon has it's a big castle, and let's say there's the first floor you go into is just the main floor, and there might be like 3 or 4 bosses in that main floor, okay? And then you might be able to go upstairs to the second floor, up on the balcony and the bedrooms and different things, and then maybe there's a dungeon environment. Well, each one of those could be considered a wing. It's basically a subdivision of a dungeon where it's still the same theme, right? We're still in the same castle, we're still in the same dungeon, but they broke it up into different parts. So the first wing for the first raid in Guild Wars 2 is going to have 4 bosses in it. And that's going to come out sometime between when Heart of Thorns launches on the 23rd and the holiday season. They've said sometime in between there. And then early in January, the second wing will come out. It'll probably be another 3 or 4 bosses, but it's going to be part of that same dungeon. You're still going to go to the same spot to kind of enter the instance, and then you're going to pick which wing you want to do. Kind of like the dungeons that they have now. You know how the dungeons they have now have an explorable path and a story mode path, and there's multiple explorable paths, but you go to the same dungeon, you get to pick which path you want to go down. That's kind of like what a wing is. So hope that answers the question. Next up, I have 2 questions from Irving that I'm going to address. One is, besides Heart of Thorns, what are some games you're looking forward to playing in the remainder of this year? Well, Heart of Thorns is really the main game that I'm kind of looking forward to. I'm actually interested in Minecraft Story Mode by Telltale Games, which I think comes out like next week. It's like really soon. I might give that a shot. I love the Telltale games, and I played a bunch of Minecraft with my kids before, so I'm kind of looking forward to maybe sitting down and playing with the kids in some form and seeing their reaction to it, because they love Minecraft, but this is going to be such a different experience for them than what they're used to with Minecraft. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. Also, Star Wars Battlefront looks amazing, so I might give that a shot. Fallout 4, a lot of people have been talking about that. I haven't played Fallout since the original Fallout 1. I haven't played any of the more recent ones. But it might be something I check out. We'll see. But in general, Heart of Thorns. Yeah, Heart of Thorns, just a little bit excited. The second question for Irving asks, do you think there's hope for games after their communities have become extremely toxic like League of Legends, Dota 2, and most shooters now? I tend to think there's always hope. I try to be positive and kind of have that attitude. I think the developers have to take a very strong stance in order to turn something like that around. Like they're gonna have to make some hard decisions. And I know like Riot has actually, it seems to be, at least from, like, I don't follow the game very closely, but just from news posts and stuff like that, they seem to have taken harsher stances on cracking down on even like pro and very popular players who just abuse the chat system and stuff like that. They are definitely monitoring that. They definitely have a team of people that kind of tries to crack down on that kind of stuff. But it's a very popular game, and it's a very like elite skill type game, and there's a lot of bad behavior in there, unfortunately. And that's one of the reasons I don't play League of Legends anymore. I started dipping my toes in that game at one point. I do enjoy MOBAs, but, a game like Heroes of the Storm, where it still can be a little bit toxic, but I could just really quickly just turn everybody else's chat off and just play my own game. And, I've found that is a little bit more of a friendly community and stuff like that. But, yeah, in general, I do believe that you can turn things around. It takes a Herculean effort. The company really has to focus on that. They have to draw a real hard line in the sand and say, yes, we're going to allow this, and no, we're not going to allow that. And it really it will attract a different audience over time that way. Guild Wars 2 ArenaNet, they started out right off the gate, like when the game first launched, and they did not tolerate anything. They were banning and giving people timeouts like all over the place for using language, and there was a lot of backlash about that at first, where people were like, I can't believe I said, Snickersnoodle, and you banned me or gave me a timeout, or I can't use the forums now. Like over time, it just cultivates this community that, does not tolerate those kind of things. And, it's worked really well. It's still, it's a very friendly community overall. You're still going to have outliers no matter what game there is. But in general, yes, I do believe they can turn it around. It's just challenging, difficult, and the company really has to really push for it to happen. Next up is a question from Dr. Yiggles, who asks, is there one thing that we don't have in Guild Wars 2 or coming in Heart of Thorns that you would like? What would it be? It's a great question. Like, over the years, I've mentioned Interior Talk over and over and over again what features I thought were missing and wanted to be in there. And fortunately, they've come out and added them all in at this point, right? So I really, for a long time, I wanted the first-person camera and the ability to have a greater field of view. We fortunately got that this year, last March. I wanted the wardrobe system because the game is all about like looking cool in the game, and being able to collect skins and have them account wide on your wardrobe. That was another feature I wanted, and now we have that as well. And then the last crusade that I was going for is we need something to do with your guild that's challenging, larger scaled, instanced. And now we're going to be getting raids in Heart of Thorns. So really, the game's got everything I look for in an MMO at this point. It's really, really well done. The one thing I will say, and this is going to piggyback onto raiding and stuff, and I mentioned this in my raid interview video, I really wish the raid group allowed you to have flexible amount of people in it. Right now it's going to be 10 players and 10 players only, and it's going to create a situation where you have to come up with all kinds of rules in your guild, like who gets into that raid, and if it winds up being very, very challenging and these bosses are no joke, are you going to have to start excluding people that don't necessarily play their class the best, or aren't the best at getting out of the fire or learning the mechanics and stuff like that. And it's gonna create situations within guilds that we don't have right now. So I would love there to be a system in place that allowed you to have like, you can invite anywhere from like 10 to 30 people into it, and the raid will scale up and down in difficulty level accordingly. That's the one thing I wish we would have in there. Next up is Rachel Morales, who asks, what other specializations do you think HOT will bring post-release? It's interesting that you mentioned that. I don't think they're going to, and that's sad. They've kind of billed it specializations as kind of like this thing, like, we'll have more elite specializations over time, and then you'll be able to kind of swap things out and stuff like that. And I think that's certainly within their plan. But I don't think it's going to come out quickly. I don't think we're going to get more elite specializations in Heart of Thorns. I think elite specializations are going to be stuff that we only see when expansions comes out, unfortunately. I think that it would be really cool if they could come out with specializations more quickly than that. And in fact, I kind of was talking either on stream or to my guild another night, where I was basically saying, it would be neat if after the launch of the expansion and everyone gets one elite specialization, if they start designing them one at a time. And maybe this is Warrior Month, right? And we're going to get a new elite specialization for the Warrior. They come out, they announce it, they get some feedback on it, and they implement it, and now the Warriors got another choice, and they really can kind of focus on making sure that elite specialization is really neat and interesting and balanced, because they focused all their energies on that one specialization rather than waiting and trying to get all 9 of them to change at once. So do that once per month. The only problem with that is you might wait a long time to get yours because, you might be number 9 and that might take 9 months to get to you. And maybe they could do it in reverse order and release them the opposite way the next time. But I know that there's problems with that whole kind of design philosophy. But in general, I don't think it's going to be something we see quickly, which is kind of sad because I think when they originally announced it, elite specializations were maybe a lot less. Maybe I tend to think that there was some sort of what do they call feature creep involved in this, where they over time they added more and more things to what the specializations can do. Now each one of them is like class changing in a way. Like it's not just giving you a couple more skills and a different weapon. A lot of them have different F abilities now, and they kind of really there's a lot to them. And I think one of the reasons why I'd like to see multiple elite specializations is for something like the case of the Ranger and Druid, right? Let's say you like being a Ranger, but you don't want to heal at all. Well, your elite specialization is a Druid. So if you want, if you're going into the expansion as a Ranger and you don't want to heal, well, then you don't really have an elite specialization. You get a couple new pets that you can play with, but it would be great. Like something like the Druid is awesome if the Ranger has like 2 or 3 or 4 elite specializations to choose from, right? Maybe there's a petless specialization, right? That you don't have a pet anymore, but now you're more powerful by yourself. And maybe there's like a melee Ranger, and now you have the Druid, the healing Ranger, and then the normal Ranger. That works really well. And then you can have some really unique specializations, some really cool stuff in there. It's just unfortunate that that's not the case. I don't think they're going to have any more elite specializations. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think they're going to have any more in Heart of Thorns. Next up is a question from Ike and Felsis, who asks, what are you going to do right after the Heart of Thorn releases? Are you going to focus on exploration, personal story, unlocking elite's masteries, or all of the above? Well, it's kind of all of the above. I'm going to be streaming a lot when it comes out. I'm going to be streaming like right before it launches at whatever time early in the morning that they put it out there. I'm going to be streaming like all that weekend. So I'm going to be playing a lot. So you get to see firsthand what I'm doing. I'm going to kind of just jump in and start exploring the new zones, start exploring the story. I'm really interested in where the story goes. How many story instances are we going to get right when the game launches? And then there's going to be this lots of playing to unlock those masteries. That is the progression in the system. We're not going to be gaining levels, but we want to get as many masteries done as possible. And I'm going to be looking forward to packing in as much as possible when the game first launches, just to explore it, kind of get used to it, unlock as many masteries, and hopefully then be in good shape. So when the raids come out and we want to focus on that kind of stuff, we're also going to probably unlock our guild hall pretty early on, so we can, there's a lot of time gated stuff in the development of the guild hall, so the sooner you can unlock that with your guild is probably better. So those couple things are some of my early goals for that. Next up is a question from Lamar Freeman, who asks, what do you think is Guild Wars 2's biggest strength and greatest weakness? Interesting. Lots of Guild Wars 2 questions. The biggest strength has always been how you can jump in and just play with anybody, right? It's so much fun launching up a stream and saying, hey, I'm going to be in this zone, and if 3 people show up, great, we can run around and play. If 20 people, 50 people show up, we can run around and play, and we don't have to worry about who's on what quest. We don't have to worry about if we're in the same party. We're all sharing in the experience. We're all sharing in the loot and just having fun playing. Same thing with guild missions. Everybody can join us in guild missions. It doesn't matter who it is, what spec you are, how's your gear, how good you are. So that's always been one of the strengths. Obviously, there's going to be some content. There's actually content in the game now that works like this, but even more so in the expansion, like raids and the high-level fractals. That's a little bit more, exclusive. But I love that I love the whole leveling experience in Guild Wars 2 with the I've had people start and I can run around on a level 60 character and I can run around with them at level 3 and it's great. I still feel like I'm progressing my characters. I can be getting map completion on that or doing some things like that. Or getting gold and different types of loot and crafting materials while they're playing. Whereas other games, if you go and you're power leveling someone, you're getting really nothing out of it. You're just wandering around, just trying to help your friend. You're not really even playing, and you're kind of like dinking and one-shotting everything around it. So I think that's the biggest strength. The greatest weakness, I think one of the great weaknesses of Guild Wars 2 is the need for, like, there's so many videos out there that you'll see that what to do when you're at level 80. Right? And folks that are heavily invested in Guild Wars 2, we know that there's tons of things to do at level 80, right? You can do all the achievements. You can go for all these cool collections. You can make things like Maudry's back piece, and you can do world versus world and PvP, and you can craft a legendary, and you can unlock things in the wardrobe. And like there's a whole bunch of things, but I don't think the game itself explains that well enough to people, right? You can literally hit level 80, maybe you've done all the dungeons, and you can sit there and go, I don't know what else there is to do in this game. What are people doing? Like, what tells you that there's Maudry's back piece? What tells you, all these different things. So I think maybe some sort of UI or some sort of interface that you can bring up. And actually, WildStar has a feature like this. It's like a content finder. You hit a button and it brings up for your level. What are some things you could be doing? Maybe they do that at max level in Guild Wars 2. They hit a button and say, all right, here's all the stuff that you can kind of go for. Here's this scavenger hunt in Lion's Arch, right? Shoot all these Karka and get this princess things that'll eat up your Dragonite ore, or give you some activities. Maybe it'll even pull up random activities, and just you can go if you hit the button, it gives you a random activity and you complete it, then it gives you some bonus reward or something like that. I think that's one of the greatest weaknesses, and it's kind of difficult to explain to someone who has played the game and stopped playing, and it's like I've tried to do this to real life friends of mine who stopped playing the game and say like, hey, there's so much to do in the game, and they're like, well, like what? And you're like, well, you can go and do achievements and there's collections, and like it's hard to kind of get them to understand what it is exactly. So I think that's the greatest weakness right now with the game. Next, I have a question from @PrinceMcGickle. He asks, do you have any plans to lead a raid group when we get them in Heart of Thorns? Yes, my guild is going to be running raids. We're still trying to figure out the schedule and stuff like that, but I am one of the raid captains. I'm looking forward to actually leading a group through it. I was a raid leader for many years in World of Warcraft, and I kind of miss actually being in charge of a team and trying to tackle something really difficult, and it's something I've been waiting for in Guild Wars 2 for a long time. So yes, I will be. Next up, from Alaska Winter, what is your favorite class to play while Dungeon and Dragoning? Can be pulled from any edition. Okay, so I used to play Dungeons & Dragons a whole lot. I haven't played much in recent years. I played it since I was 10 years old, and I was usually the Dungeon Master, though. That was my favorite thing to be, is the Dungeon Master. There's been a couple campaigns I've been in as a player. I typically like to play spellcasters of some sort, usually like a wizard, or sometimes multi-class, so I can have a lot of different options. And I like playing spell casting class that doesn't use necessarily all of the stereotypical like magic missile, fireball, lightning bolt spells. I like the stuff where you can really use your imagination and be creative with it. And so I like to take a spell like web or something like that and think of interesting applications of it, or just something where the whole point of a pen and paper role-playing game is to use your imagination. So I like not necessarily being a force to be reckoned with in combat all the time, but I like to be able to do stuff in those role-playing sessions, or when you're talking to NPCs, or when you need to trick somebody, or you're doing something in a city, or just have some spells that you can fireballing when you're in the middle of a city, not really going to go over too well, but creating illusions here and there, that might be fun. So those are the kind of classes I usually play. But if I had to answer, it would be dungeon mastering. This next question comes from two of my guild mates who were arguing over Twitter about who actually gets the credit for asking this. Inks and Fenris, what was your #1 motivation for starting a YouTube channel? I'd like to eventually do a whole video on this. I want to kind of go through like the whole journey of where it came from all the way to like present day, but it's kind of like a long self-indulgent video, and it's kind of like I haven't really done it, but maybe for some some special occasion, I'll put out a video. It'd be very long because it kind of dates back quite a bit. But in general, my number one motivation was, I mean, it basically boils down to about 6.5 years ago, I was laid off from the corporate world, and I swapped roles and became a stay-at-home dad. And as my kids started growing up and becoming more self-sufficient and having some hours where they actually went to school every day, I found myself having some extra time. And I was watching content all the time. I started on YouTube. I started watching, TankSpot. Like I was heavy into World of Warcraft, so I was visiting TankSpot a lot. And Lore over there was doing the weekly Marmot, and he was doing some raid guides over there. And then there was another website which I actually wound up writing for called Project Lore, and this is a group of guys who used to just record their dungeon runs together and some of their leveling up together, and it was a really fun to watch other people do that. And I was thinking in my head, I would like to be able to do that. I'd like to share my thoughts about the games. I'm a big fan of theater. I have a theater major. I used to perform in front of people like all through when I was a kid and a young adult, and I thought, hey, this could be a marriage of video games and kind of like performing. And I just started a YouTube channel to just start talking about it. And some of those videos are on my channel, really old, and they're terrible to watch. But I also had another YouTube channel called Red Rhino Games. That was actually the first one where I put out a bunch of episodes of different things back then. And then I eventually decided to start over and rebrand everything as Bog Otter. So that's kind of how things started out. I just have a love for video games and a love for performing, and that's really where that's just really how it began. Next up is a question from Anonymous, who asks, what is your favorite animal besides otters? The answer to that is tigers. Ever since I was a little boy, I loved tigers. My brother's favorite animal was a lion, and so I had to be tigers to be like slightly better than him. We always competed over things. So yeah, we both liked big cats a lot. I just think they're gorgeous creatures. They're absolutely amazing. Next up, I have a series of rapid-fire questions from Talifalana. I'm going to answer Marvel or DC. Marvel. Red or blue, referencing red versus blue. I've never seen it, so I don't know anything about it, really. So I'll choose red because that's my favorite color. Which James Bond actor do you like the best? I'm not a huge fan of James Bond. I did see a couple of the Pierce Brosnan movies. Those are the ones I've liked the best, so probably him as James Bond. But if you're talking about which of those actors I like the best in general, Sean Connery. Motorcycle or trike? Neither. Maybe trike because it might be slightly safer. Truck or car? I like cars. PC or Mac? PC for sure. Andrew, iOS, or Windows Phone? Android. Ford or Chevy? Chevy. I had a Camaro as my very first car. Love my Camaro. Watermelon or cantaloupe? Watermelon, definitely. I like them both, but watermelon is definitely a nicer fruit. Beef or pork? Definitely beef. Not a big fan of pork. Dog or cat? Dog all the way. Allergic to cats. Old school or new school? Come on, look at me. Old school. Daytime or nighttime? Probably nighttime. Probably nighttime. Thanks for those questions. And the final question, and this was an anonymous one, would you ever consider playing World of Warcraft again? I consider it a lot, actually. Every time there's a new exciting buzz, a new expansion announcement or something, I watch the entire thing, and I'm very interested in the development of the game. It still holds a lot of great memories for me. And I've told this story a bunch of times, and I'm not going to tell the whole thing, but me and like 9 close friends all bought World of Warcraft together, including my dad and my brother. And we played for 7 years all together. And we took down like a lot of the raid bosses together and just had some great moments of success and, moments of agony and defeat. And just I can look back and I could probably name you story after story of all these wonderful adventures in it. So it'll always have a place in my heart. I've tried going back a couple of times. I've played, actually recently as this summer, they gave me like a free week to just jump back in. And I actually leveled one level. I went from like 85 to 86 because I'm still like trying to get through the Mists of Pandaria content. And it doesn't grab me anymore. A lot of the reason why I played it so long was the social stickiness of it. And besides one close friend who plays it still quite a bit, everybody else has moved on. So, do I consider it? Yes. Do I watch all of the news of the game? Yes. But do I think I'm going to jump back in? Who knows? Maybe. that's going to wrap things up. Once again, thanks to everybody who sent in questions. I really enjoyed answering them for you today. If you have any other questions that you want me to answer, I'd like to do this regularly, but that really depends on you guys. I've tried to do this in the past before and I haven't gotten too many questions. But shoot them over to askbogotter@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on Facebook or on Twitter. The links are in the description below if you ask in those areas as well. And that's it. That's going to wrap things up. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button before you go, and I hope everybody has a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Take care.